Good evening. I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. Fog of war. The first three reports are wrong. We're dealing with Nairobi, the murder raid in the shopping mall, Westgate, in Nairobi, beginning Nairobi time, Saturday, midday. I'll speak about this throughout the evening, but what we have now is very incomplete reporting. We're looking for trends. We're looking for the significance, the larger pattern here. Al-Shabaab means the boys. Al-Shabaab is associated with the failed state of Somalia these last decades. Somalia is a war-torn and extremely fractured country. Only on the map does it look cohesive. The pirates of Somalia, the provisional government that is now the permanent government in Mogadishu under the auspices of the United Nations and the African Union, holding on with some governance, but Al-Shabaab is a transnational militia that is entirely sponsored by jihadists, and the connection between the jihadists of East Africa, reaching back to the 20th century, the attack on the American embassy in Nairobi was part of the jihadists of East Africa, and their link to Al-Qaeda is the question we're going to explore. Tom Joscelyn of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies Long War Journal with his colleague Bill Roggio of the same are here. We're going to start with Tom. A very good evening to you. You mentioned there was a UN report some 2 months ago that indicated the possibility of Al-Shabaab transnational attack against Kenya. Explain, please. Good evening, Tom.
Well, good evening, John. Shabaab, of course, is an Al-Qaeda affiliate. They swore allegiance to Al-Qaeda officially and formally in February 2012. And they, every indication is they're under Al-Qaeda's command, although we don't know how often Al-Qaeda's central leadership is communicating with Shabaab's leaders. But the UN in July, every year they come out with a report on Shabaab and what it's up to. And in July of this year, they came out with their latest report and explained that basically Shabaab's operatives, foreign fighters in particular, were seeking direction from Al-Qaeda and East African operatives to sort of plan their new assault, their new terrorist assault in Kenya and elsewhere. To my mind, it looks like what happened with the Westgate Mall siege is consistent with what was identified in that UN report.
The UN report is pointing to the possibility that Shabaab is going to go transnational. We saw that bombing right after the World Cup in Burundi or Uganda. It was Uganda, but this is a major effort launching into Nairobi against what you'd have to say is a soft target in the midst of the Kenyan Defense Force. Did the report flag that they were capable of that scale of operation, Tom?
The report didn't, but the thing about Shabaab is they've been transnational now for a while. You mentioned the one bombing at the World Cup site for the tourists that were watching it there.
Right. That's
just one example. I mean, there are other examples, too. I mean, during the 2012 Olympics in London, actually, UK officials put an order on, basically a security order, some sort, certificate of some sort, on a Shabaab-trained militant that looked like he was targeting the London Olympics. So there was concern even there. There was also a group called the London Boys, who were trained by Shabaab, who looked like they possibly were going to go back to the UK to commit terrorist attacks. And an Al-Qaeda operative who was a top Shabaab official named Fazl Muhammad, actually when he was killed, he had plans in his possession reportedly targeting international sites. So this group has been planning international terrorist attacks for a while, has engaged in international terrorist attacks for a while, and it's consistent with Al-Qaeda's general affiliate strategy where they fight inside insurgencies inside these various countries, but also plan transnational attacks.
Bill, good evening to you. In the piece that you've put up at Long War Journal, you flag the comparison with the Mumbai attack. How so, Bill?
Yeah, it's very similar in many respects. You have assault teams from attacking. Basically, look, Kenya is basically outside of the active war zone. Places like Somalia, Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Pakistan. You send in an assault team, and there's been communications between the assault team and Shabaab. We know of that because Shabaab on its official Twitter account has said it's been in touch with them and is providing updates when the Twitter account is active, updates from the fighters. So, whether there's some direction going back and forth, I wouldn't be surprised that we're going to find out about that as well. And also soft targets as well, going after malls, going after places where Christians and Jews are frequenting. Excuse me. And one additional thing, they attempted to sort out the Muslims from the non-Muslims when they conducted the attack.
Bill, there are reports. Fog of war, I understand it's early yet. We'll sort this out over the next days. There are reports of non-African attackers, either Arab or European. There's a prominent report that a woman named the White Widow, a woman from Great Britain, a British citizen who's associated with the 2005 subway attack in London, the tube attack in London. Can you indicate, Bill, your reporting, are you seeing a lot of nationalities possibly involved in the attack? And what is the significance of that, Bill?
Yeah, there was a Twitter site that was claiming it was an official Shabaab site, and Shabaab has since said that no, it wasn't their official account. But they put out some specific information, said there were at least 3 Americans, a Finn, a Brit, then they named 3 Somalis as well, and I think there was a Syrian in the mix. So Shabaab said that wasn't legitimate, but I got to tell you, I give some credence to the account. It may have actually been someone who spoke out of turn, who decided to provide some. Just from reading the names and the locations, that person either knew quite a bit about Shabaab to spoof them, or it was actually real. We're going to find out once this assault is over and the nationalities are sorted out. We're also seeing indications in the press, but it's hard to know if intelligence officials are taking that information that was on this Twitter account or its original information, and if reporters are doing the same.
Yes, Tom, I wanted to mention, I've been pointed to pay attention to these non-African attackers. Al-Shabaab is largely an African organization, similar to Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula is largely Yemenis Arab organization. To pay attention to that, because changing modality, in other words, using European or an American or a Latino-based jihadist conversion to Islam means that they have capabilities of penetrating our defenses as well as Nairobi. Do you account for that, Tom?
Well, I think that's right. I think that's sort of been the goal, the longstanding goal for Al-Qaeda and its affiliates, are to use Western recruits, Westernized recruits, come into the fold that they can repurpose for international terrorist attacks. I'm sure that's the thinking when you go into a place like Westgate Mall or somewhere along those lines as well, that this may be something that facilitates, their ability to basically commit an attack and fool security forces and something along those lines, although we're still waiting to hear exactly who was responsible, what the hit team in Westgate Mall was actually comprised of in terms of nationalities. But this has been something they've been looking at to do a long time. As I mentioned, Shabaab had recruited this group called the London Boys that were supposedly going to be trained and then repurposed for international terrorist attacks. We know that, here in the U.S., unfortunately, dozens of young men have been recruited by Shabaab to be used in operations, although those have been mainly focused, as far as we know so far, inside Somalia and in Africa there. However, but there's always that potential to repurpose these recruits, these westernized recruits, and use them in various other types of terrorist attacks.
Bill, I want to puzzle here. Shabaab has been what you'd have to say a local trouble to Somalia and along the Kenyan border. Not necessarily kidnapping, but certainly raiding into to the north shore of Kenya. This looks like they've moved up a couple of places in the batting order of major threats, Bill. This looks like an operation that would have been launched more recently, as you've said, by Lashkar-e-Taiba, major operation with ISI support.
Well, keep in mind they did in summer 2011 conduct a double suicide attack in Uganda, and that was
the World Cup attack, right?
Yes,
at the sports club, right?
I think it was 70 or 80 people killed. So they have had foreign aspirations, as Tom mentioned, the plots as well. But this, what I call the suicide assault, what they're doing here is, the assault team that's going to go in. These guys know they're going to die. They know they're not living through this fight, just as in Mumbai. We see this type of attack throughout Al-Qaeda's theaters, and the fact is, I think they hone these tactics in the local theaters, in the battlefields. In the case for Shabaab in Somalia, they conduct the attacks and study them and dissect them and then perfect them, and then they're going ahead and trying to take them and export them to the areas outside of the active war zones. I know that's probably an imprecise way to look at it, but it's the best way I could explain it.
And Bill, we'll wait for video from Al-Qaeda as to who's dead and who's not, because they'll make announcements if they've lost people.
Oh, absolutely. I expect to see martyrdom tapes,
right.
These guys recording prior to their death, and I expect to see them. Shabaab is very adept at it with its propaganda, so we'll know soon enough who these guys are and what they're about.
Bill Roggio of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, along with his colleague Tom Joscelyn of the FTD, is in Long War Journal. When we come back, there were also mass murders in Pakistan against a church and major bombings in Iraq, which is sectarian warfare reignited. Also attacks that are significant in Waziristan. Drones are active. This is a very large battle space. We've talked about it before, from the Atlantic all the way to the Hindu Kush. It's active, and Al-Qaeda or its representatives are as aggressive as ever. I'm John Batchelor.